à tous et à toutes. Merci d'être.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here for this conference or workshop on carbon finance.
And I think all the presentation will be made in English for our intervenant. So I don't have this word in English. It starts well. So the purpose of this working session is to share a bit more with you about the project side of carbon finance. There's a lot of talks and scrutiny on the demand side, on the claim side. But it's true that it's not often that we have the opportunity to share a bit more about the project development and to explain what we do, what is beyond and behind a carbon credit. So again, pleased to meet you. Maybe we can introduce all ourselves before starting in 1 minute. So I'm Romain de Raphael. I'm the head of the project development team within EcoAct. EcoAct is a French actor on carbon finance. We have a pipe of 40 projects today on NBS projects and cook stoves. And I will switch to Ometer. Stéphane, maybe you can say a word.
Hello to all. My name is Stéphane Quinard. I'm a co-founder of Ometer. We are a reforestation company active in the Sahel area. We have a team of 75 people. And we are developing restoring land in Burkina Faso, Mali and Senegal. And I will tell you a bit more about our project and our challenges.
Thank you, Stéphane. Elisa?
Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Elisa Lopez. I'm coming from Spain. I am the Blue Carbon Manager in the project development team of EcoAct. And obviously we base our projects in the coastal and marine ecosystems. Let's discuss a little bit more later.
Thank you, Elisa. And Julien?
Hello, everyone. I'm Julien Ancel. I'm the CEO of Mille et Une Fontaines, 1001 Fontaine, which is a French NGO whose mission is to design and bring to scale sustainable solutions for safe drinking water.
Okay, so before starting the case studies, I'm making a small introduction. So don't worry, I'm the only one to have such a complex slide. Then you will have beautiful photographs presenting the projects, but that's what a company has in mind, a CSR person has in mind when it starts on a net zero journey. There is more and more codification, normalization. Here it's shared by what we call the science-based target that labels some let's say, climate policy that an organization starts. And it helps you to understand why there are more and more demand on this voluntary carbon market for projects. Basically, it works in 4 steps, let's say. Basically, an organization has to reach net zero goal at the end, okay, of its journey. It means that at some point, you need to have reduced your emissions and you need to offset that emissions with carbon sequestration to reach the net zero point where no incremented greenhouse gas is emitted into the atmosphere. So it means you have to set targets that are aligned with what the IPCC shares, okay? And you have also to offset right away to accelerate decision-making, climate policy, and tangible projects on the ground. And this is where you have this number 3 that will offset all the reduction that you make. That's one thing. And then the second thing is that you have to prepare for sequestration, because net zero is only achieved once you remove some carbon offsets. And that is a specific kind of project that you have to plan today. So Stéphane and Elisa will share more about this removal part and Julien more about this abatement part, okay? So all companies, they see this norm. And more they come to us and say, okay, I want to act now, I want to accelerate finance to climate projects. And this is where you see it translates in the growth of the VCM, the voluntary carbon market. Next year, it was 500 million credits that were traded. It came out of 200, so it's really currently in a boom. It is led by many types of carbon projects. You have nature-based solutions, so mostly it's forestry conservation, but more and more we are talking about reforestation. So Stefan will share a case on that, and Elisa about a mangrove restoration project. And you have also what we call in EcoAd community-based projects, so projects that really improves livelihoods, such as cook stove distribution, off-grid renewable energies, and safe water delivery that Julien will explain more about. This demand is driven by several trends. There's the voluntary market, that's one, but there are also more and more regulatory demand. For instance, in France, now all airlines, they have to offset, it's mandatory, a part on international market, a part on the local market with specific standards. And that's the last point I wanted to share. All of this, you cannot develop a project and just claim, hey, I just sequestrated some carbon and here it is, you can buy it. You have to go through a whole journey also of a certification scheme, and you have to apply some norms that are guaranteed by some standards. The main ones today are the VERA, the Verified Carbon Standard, and the Gold Standard, okay? All these standards that are recognized by the International Carbon Reduction and Offset Alliance, ICROA, they all basically follow those principles that are publicly written. You can consult them on their website. And the main point is to bring projects, to prove that projects follow those principles. Additionality, so you need to prove that you needed carbon finance so that the project exists. Permanence, you have to prove that the greenhouse gases that you avoided or sequestrated are long-term, which can be a challenge when we are talking about reforestation, obviously. Rigorous, you have methodologies of calculation that are publicly available also, and that are written by a recognized expert. Verified, there's always an auditor that comes, a third-party auditor that comes and check that the project follows all these rules. And I can tell you that it's quite complex and it takes quite some time to make projects verified. Unicity and traceability are very important. You need to have a public registry where each carbon credit has a serial number that is traceable. And when someone retires a carbon credit for its usage, we know where it comes from, we know that it has been used, and you cannot use it twice, obviously. Otherwise, it's not offset anymore. So that was all just to show you there's a lot of codification, normalization, and it brings a lot of challenge for project development. And this is among other things what our panelists will share. So I think we are starting with you, Elisa, on the Yucatan Peninsula. So I'll let you talk.
Thank you, Roman, and good morning, everyone. Again, I would like to use this time and introduce you to one of our blue carbon projects, one example in our pipeline, and I would like to discuss with you what are the implications of including such innovative projects into the carbon finance and obviously into the voluntary carbon markets. Next slide, please. Starting by the beginning. So blue carbon refers to the carbon stored in the coastal and marine ecosystems, such as mangrove forests, seagrass beds, and salt marshes. Those are the main ones, and they are located obviously in the tropical and subtropical areas, but there are many others. Through photosynthesis, these ecosystems, and I'm going to exclusively refer as coastal blue carbon. Through photosynthesis, they are plants, so they actively remove carbon from the atmosphere, and they sequester it into their green parts, their roots, and the sediment beneath them. And they do this very effectively. They are very good at it. It is published that mangrove forest can sequester up to 5 times faster than the tropical mature forests. And some species of seagrass can do so up to 10 times faster. So they are very good at it. This is why we can consider blue carbon as a very effective nature-based solution to climate change mitigation. And actually, the offsetting potential of this solution is very high. Next slide. So let me introduce you to our baby. This is the Semilla Azul project, blue seeds in Spanish. This is a community-based mangrove restoration project located in the southeast of Mexico, in the Yucatan Peninsula, in the coast of the Gulf of Mexico. And this project aims to restore 5,000 hectares of degraded mangroves and to remove from the atmosphere 4 million tons of CO2 equivalent in 20 years of project. The project will bring 200, apart from that, the project will bring 250 jobs to the community in capacity building, and it will ensure the just and fair distribution of the benefits in the community through the design and participatory implementation of a trust fund. One of the key elements of this project is the governance, the four-leg governance. So EcoAct is co-developing the project together with a woman-led local NGO called Resiliencia Azul, and together with a scientific partner in the ground and a very strong indigenous community. Next slide, Roman, please. All right, so Semilla Azul is a good example, I believe it is a good example of what we can call innovative nature-based solution, right? But this label, this innovation label, is a two-side opportunity, and we have to be very careful with it. On the one hand, it brings attached a market premium. There are few other projects as such in the market right now, and there is a high cost attached to it. We can reach market prices on a spot up to $30 per carbon unit. On the other hand, this project has also attached a very high controversy, public controversy, and obviously a lot of challenges for us developers. Coming back to the example of Semilla Azul, this project, we can call it a 5-star project, okay? It brings not only climate benefits, but also community benefits. On the one hand, it brings coastal resilience to the community. So it protects the villages and the lands against sea level rise and extreme weather events as hurricanes and droughts. Also, it supports food security and traditional livelihoods. Most of the members of this community are farmers and fishermen. And we know that these livelihoods are supported through healthy and sound mangrove forests. Also, it protects the biodiversity hotspot, as it is the Los Petenes Biosphere Reserve, where the project is located. And finally, something interesting is that the project may trigger, actually does trigger, land right security. So the project has an incentive for the local farmers of the community to legalize their land rights. But again, on the other hand of the opportunity, if you want, we have important challenges. First of it, we have an urgency sense. The Yucatan Peninsula, where the project is located, loses mangrove at a rate of 2% per year. Also, there is a need to carefully knit the incentive scheme in order to ensure the permanence of this sequestered carbon, but also to engage the community. We can talk about this later. And finally, we have the need for strong financial cases. We need the market environment to understand the uniqueness of this community, but also the uniqueness of this ecosystem. We need time for let the mangroves grow. They will not grow from one day to the other, right? They are plants, they are trees. So we need the investors to understand that time frame. So in a nutshell, in order for us to unlock the potential behind blue carbon projects as an effective nature-based solution, we need to help the market to internalize both those benefits, but also those challenges. And I'm very happy to discuss any of these points later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. I think there's no video after all. Okay. Okay. Maybe Stefan then.
Okay, thank you, Romain. Well, I want to talk a bit about Ometer and what we are doing in the Sahel area. We are also trying to set up a 5-star project, Elisa, but we also have some challenges. So maybe first slide on Ometer. We are organized as a company, so we are not an NGO, but we are a business, let's say, with social vocation. As I said, we do the reforestation and restoration of degraded land in the Sahel area, which is well, a dry tropical land. There is nearly no rainfall. And we fight against desertification, actually. Our logic is finding ecological, social, and environmental benefits. But I will come back on that. Our company has 75 people, and we grow the company year after year. Maybe about our activities. You see here the map of Africa, West Africa, and you see this area which is similar to the Great Green Wall. You might have heard about the Great Green Wall. We are actually building it from Senegal up to Mali and to Burkina Faso. Here we have some details on how we are organized. So we are a Belgian company where we do the financing and let's say the program development, also organize the logistics and the technical support. Our first country was Burkina Faso, where we had 36,000 hectares in restoration. The problem with we have a community-based program. We have 201 communities in our partnership. The problem there is the insecurity in Burkina Faso is really playing important problems for a carbon case. If you have to send an auditor, well, it's simply impossible, and that is affecting us. So I'll come back on that. Second is Mali, where we operate from Burkina Faso, and then the last country that we opened is Senegal, where we have around 4,000 hectares in restoration now, and a partnership with 14 communities in the east of Senegal, Bakel. So this is, let's say, where we do the restoration, and we do that based on a technical method. We have a tractor and a Valerani system that basically creates bassins all over the land. I think there is a picture somewhere. Well, you see it here. It's really degraded land. There is nothing anymore, just some baobab, maybe from some 100 years old. And then a tractor passes by and creates these bassins. People do the seeds in it, and then in the rain season, the trees start to grow. This is the method, and it works, but it has some challenges. The first one is the nature. So as I said, very low rainfall. That's a given. We can't change it, but of course this does not help to grow trees fast. So if you have to wait long for your mangroves, we have to wait even longer for trees. Secondly, the sequestration level is low. It is typically a kind of a Sahel savanna. It's dry tropical area, so it's not like a forest in Europe or something. It's really smaller trees, so the sequestration that we have is low. That means less carbon per hectare, etc. And the starting point is very deteriorated land. You need heavy earthworks. In this land, when you go there and you put a stone on it, nothing moves. It's just so hard. It's by the sun. It's completely hard, compact, yes. So you need real strong equipment to open the soil and to allow water again to infiltrate, and that is costly. So that's also a negative element. So not a lot of carbon and a high cost to restore the land. Secondly, there are some country elements that do not help. So as I said, civil war in Burkina Faso, insecurity in Mali. That is why we shifted to Senegal. Where we try to set up a carbon case, but also there is a heavy weight of the administration. Yes, you can't imagine, but it's much easier to do a mining project than to do a reforestation project in Senegal. When we import a tractor, you have to pay 40% import taxes. If a mining company wants to enter a mining machine, it's free. So just to tell you, mines need to evolve also there. And finally, there is an unclear legal context for carbon. So that means, you can develop the project, you can get the certificates, but you need to be able to pass them over to a company in Europe who wants to offset. And for that, you need a legal framework. If tomorrow we have carbon credits and then they say, okay, but you pay 25% taxes on it, well, it dramatically changes your business case. So I think these are all, let's say, country elements that do not help to create a carbon case easily. The last element is the community-based. So we have all these partnerships with the villages, which is great because you have empowerment of local communities. And we do that in a kind of win-win relation. So we say, okay, we invest in your land to make it fertile again. As a counterpart, you have to protect it, you have to participate, you have to supply labor to do the sowing, etc. So it's a good collaboration with them. But you depend on the engagement. If they say, okay, come here, put your trees and grasses and our animals will eat everything, then we have a problem. So we really rely on them, and we see that the grazing pressure is increasing. There are just too many animals in this area. So we start to put temporary fences to really protect the site under restoration. These are all elements that do not help, but we're still convinced that we will be able to make a carbon case there. We have a track record in these earthworks. We know how to do that. Today, we do this paid on tree planting money. So we are paid by tree planters like Ecosia. I don't know if you heard about Ecosia, but we are the #1 partner of Ecosia, planting the trees. So we do that today, but not in a carbon logic, but in a tree planting logic. And we want to shift our model towards carbon, because we think that if we can make a carbon case viable there, we can really scale it up and do it on even larger scale. But that's a struggle where we are in together with EcoAct. We have access to sites. That's not the problem. We do great work there. Many villages want us to work on their land and to make it fertile again. So that's not a problem. If you drive one day through Senegal, you will see that there are plenty of opportunities. So we have a successful community program that is also a proven program that works well. And we have the knowledge and the partners to go through the carbon certification process. And we have the local teams there. So I think we are well equipped, but there are some challenges that need to be solved. And the main one is the price. We generate carbon credits, but I don't know what the market price is exactly. That's not so transparent. But let's say that we are at the higher end of the carbon price, maybe around 15 to 20 euro per ton, whereas the long-term market would be around 10 to 15 maybe. So. Well, I look at you, Romo. So definitely there is something where there is a kind of a penalty for the Sahel area that we suffer. And we think that a combination of subsidies, grants, public money combined with carbon money could be a solution to that. But that is not available today. But we will come back to that later on. But for me, that is a challenge. Or you need impact investors willing to buy certificates and taking into account all the profits. And because what we do there, definitely, it has a huge impact on the local community from the ecological point of view, a social point of view. We have 250 partner villages with approximately 1,000 people per village living in there. So it really has an impact, and therefore we would like to do it on a larger scale.
Thank you, Stéphane. Very interesting. Julien, I give you the little device.
All right, so Milieu une Fontaine is basically a water access project, but it's a project that has made the carbon case and that has integrated already carbon finance into its operating and economic model. So I will guide you through what we do at the water project, why actually we are eligible for carbon credits, but I'd also like to give you some more feedback, because we started this journey 8 years ago, that it's not super easy. So I'll give you some insight on what it is, what it means concretely, and what challenges we face. All right, so what you see here basically, and that's a picture we took in Myanmar, is what you call a water kiosk. So basically a water kiosk is, as you see, a small water treatment factory based inside the community. And what we do within 1000 Fontaine is basically we train and we empower local people to produce and deliver safe drinking water for their communities at an affordable price. So it's a decentralized model. If you summarize basically what happens in the development world, when we talk about water access project, very often in the communities where we are, you have some wells that are being built, which is great, but many times the problem is that the well can break. So there is a strong problem of continuity of operations. There are also pipe systems that are being progressively built, but the more remote you are from the poor villages, the less chance you have that you'll have access to pipe. And even if you have access to the pipe, the quality is not guaranteed at all. So we really tried to find a new solution. We were not humanitarian NGO people when we started that back in 2004. We really tried to crack what we believe are the two key issues when it comes to water. Is the question of quality. How do you guarantee the quality of the water at the point of use? It seems natural to us, but not to billions of people. And the question of sustainability. How do you make it sustainable over time? And that's what led us to build this project, which basically relies on what we call social business principle, theoretized by Mohamed Yunus. So it's basically applying a business approach, market-based approach, to solve a social business, and not to make profit, but just to create impact that is sustainable. So what we do basically is in the village where we operate, we launch those stations. We train local people. We build the stations, and it's quite an easy technology. It's a technology that existed 40 years ago. So it's not a super innovative technology. It's not super innovative when you visit the site in Cambodia. You're like, okay, well, it's just a small factory. But what's very innovative is to make that work in a remote village, in the context, of Cambodian people that have to manage, an industrial tool, basically, and also ensuring that, the people in the communities understand and will pay for water. Because what happens in the areas where we operate is that many often, particularly that was the case when we started the project, and it's still happening now, people will tell you, but why should I buy for water? I have, water available. I can go to the pound, I can go to the well, so why should I pay for the water? I feel great, I don't understand why I should do that. So we need a strong effort of what we call social marketing and awareness to explain to the people, that basically the water they drink actually many times, will make them sick. There are, diarrhea is the main cause of death for children under 5 years old today. So the problem of water, actually today is the main source of diseases for the kids. So, reminding them that, there is a strong link between water and health, and it's not always obvious, and explaining to them the benefits of buying the water, but at a small price. Because we try, by having a local system, a local factory, we reduce the production cost and the distribution cost. So we can maintain the water at a very small price. We are talking about less than 2 cents per liter. So that's the beauty, I would say, of the system, is that this creates a local economy, and this guarantee that even the poorest of the village can buy it. So that's basically what we do. So we do a lot of social marketing. We do a lot of efforts to train the entrepreneurs. And when we talk about ecology and environment, it's actually a very environmental friendly approach, because as you can see, we rely on solar panels and green energy to produce the water. We have technological systems that have very small water footprint, so there is very limited waste, and also the system is very resilient to climate change. So we were not an environmental project at the beginning when we started. Our really main focus was health, and economic development, but progressively we incorporated some elements to reinforce the environmental sustainability of our project. So in terms of impact today, we have 1 million beneficiaries. So every day 1 million people, most of them in Cambodia, drink safe drinking water from Tardon Fontaine. So we cover actually 1/3 of Cambodian rural commune today. So it's a national footprint. The economic model is actually sustained. So the way it works is that all the initial investment to launch this station is funded by grants, and all the operating expenses, basically the OPEX to keep the system going, is self-financed by the sales of water. So it's really a hybrid model. And today in Cambodia, in 2020, we achieved national break-even for the first time. So we're now the first water access project, basically in rural areas, to have this national footprint and this economic sustainability. And from an environmental standpoint, as I mentioned, actually our project generates carbon credit, about 15,000 to 20,000 tons of CO2 per year. And I will explain to you why. Because it's not, when we think about it, it's less obvious than my dear colleague is. And when I first heard about carbon finance, I didn't really get why Tardon Fontaine had any impact on that matter. But actually, that's the funny part of the story, is that progressively, because what we do a lot of, social surveys on the field. We are a field-driven organization, so we try to understand what changes, basically, in the habits people take, what in their consumption habits, and most of the people we convert into customers were actually drinking, water from the pond, from the well, or from the tanks, and there is in Cambodia an ancestral habit, because they know that the water is not safe. They will boil it. Okay. This is something that you see. I don't know if some of you have visited villages in Cambodia and in other areas of Southeast Asia, but they boil the water before drinking it, which is better than nothing, but still it doesn't solve the problem because it can easily be recontaminated, but that's what they do. They've been doing it for millennia. Okay, and actually, when you think about it, boiling the water, first of all, it has a cost. So when they tell you my water is free, it's not true, because they have to buy charcoal from the market. They have to take wood. So it's actually more expensive for them, and we try to do the pedagogy. It's more expensive for them to boil the water than to buy our water. It's absolutely. I mean, when I saw the data, it was really much, but it's really the case. And obviously, when they boil the water, there is CO2 in the air. So when you do the carbon equation, basically the fact of buying the water of Tardon Fontaine will actually reduce the water footprint, and that's how came the idea back in 2012 to say, okay, well, based on that, let's get carbon credits, let's go on the market, and let's integrate that into our economic model to generate sustainable revenues every year. So we were very candid, very ambitious, but at the time, but in the same time, we were very naive because we'd say, okay, now let's and we say, yeah, we want the gold standard because it looked nice on, let's have the gold standard. I had no idea what the implications were to get to the gold standards, And so we did that, and we were super naive, obviously. And so we started back in 2012. Okay, and we got the first euros in 2020, So just to say, I mean, the key message here is that, there is a business case to do. If you want to get to this project, and if some of you, manage carbon project, you really have to think about it twice. So obviously on the upside, each water kiosk, we avoid the emission of 72 tons of CO2 per year. So you multiply that by our kiosk, and back in 2020, 17,000 tons. So we sell it $8 to $9 per ton. So that's quite substantial. So the revenues from carbon finance basically are sustainable revenues because they are recurring source of revenues. That's again theoretical because with COVID everything changes, but still normally those should be revenues that will be generated every year and that should last over time. So it's important because it's not just one shot, okay? And we incorporate them. So today they represent about 20% of the revenues of the social business. And if we look at our projections based on our impact growth ambitions, we hope that we can receive more than $3 million per year in 2030, so which would represent a big amount of our revenues. Okay, so that's on the upside, and we're happy because now we've demonstrated the case. We have the revenues in the accounts now, which is great. But there are costs. So you're probably familiar with what it means to get carbon credit. You need a certification, you need auditors to get to the field, you need a preliminary certification to get the standard, then every year you need to come back to the field, collect the data, etc. And then you need to speak to a broker that is going to speak to the companies, and then yada, yada, yada. So basically it spends a lot of time. As I said, we started in 2012. The project, we only received the first euro in 2020. And the operation overall is profitable for us. It's going to be profitable this year probably because there are costs. You have to pay the broker, you have to pay for the auditor, which is normally it's their job. So it will basically take us 10 years before this whole operation becomes profitable. So that's one important message, and obviously it requires a lot of patience. But what we believe is that we've learned a lot throughout this process. So now we can basically do better than we used to, and we can use IT, improve the way we collect the data, etc. But I think there is still a structural problem that we will discuss. It's too complex of a market, we believe. I mean, for a project of our size, it should be much easier. So we should find some ways to make that easier. So yeah, the conclusion is that it's definitely something. We took the right decision to go there. We have a good business case, but you need to think about it. You need to have a solid business case before you jump in. You really need to consider it as a business case operation. So what is your scale? What is the real baseline scenario you're talking about? Because the initial assumptions you take are always more, I would say, optimistic than what the auditors will tell you. For sure. So you have to consider that. What is the price of the market? You know that. So, and also you should not consider it as the exclusive. So I mean, in the case of Tardon Fontaine, it's too much of a risk to consider that it will be more than 15-20% of revenues, because there is this volatility, there are these elements that we don't have full control on, and it should only be one part of your economic model, and it cannot be all. At least on the water access project. So yeah, that's just in a nutshell our honest experience on the carbon market. Thank you.
Thank you, Julien. Interesting, like the two others presentation. There is the video now. Do you want to put it? Go ahead.
Esta heterogeneidad, ¿no?, de diferentes tipos ecológicos de manglar que ubicamos en la región peninsular de Yucatán, hace que nos proporcionen diferentes tipos ecosistémicos en los que destacan principalmente la gran reservorio de biodiversidad que podemos observar en ellos, ya que son zonas de anidación, así también son zonas importantes de refugios pesqueros, debido a que dentro de sus raíces se albergan una gran cantidad de peces con alta relevancia económica. Sin embargo, pese a esta importancia que ya es reconocida a nivel mundial, son altamente impactados.
Semilla Azul will be developed in communal land known as Ejido in Mexico. The local communities, as the owner of the carbon project, will be involved in all the steps of the project. Locals will be trained and hired to lead and carry out restoration activities, as well to collect and monitoring all the field data. A trust fund will also finance in community initiatives to create and promote sustainable livelihoods.
Our team of experts is assisting Resiliencia Azul with the certification of the Semilla Azul project. The project aims to remove 4 million tons of carbon from the atmosphere, and we will support the community-based restoration of 5,000 hectares of mangroves in the Yucatan Peninsula, with the carbon monitoring along the lifetime of the project.
Okay, we are very proud of this project, as you probably saw. And actually, so I have 3-4 questions for the panelists, and then I propose that we go for a Q&A session with the audience. Actually, Lisa, on this project, there is something that is quite interesting. It's the way we worked with local scientists, and I think that's something that would be useful to share to the audience.
Yes, sure. The project is working with a scientific partner. This is the Mexican Carbon Program, and is working with 2 professors from different institutions of Mexico, plus a whole army of technicians that are going to train and support the local community in the restoration activities and further monitoring activities throughout the 20 years of project. Some key important steps of the validation project is actually the science behind. We need to, well, the auditors, I think we all mentioned them, and obviously the standard needs to be sure that what we claim that we are sequestering, we are actually sequestering it every year. So this is why we need this scientific support from experts. Again, this is innovation, right? So we are paving the path here, but the aim is always to use the best science possible based on the pilot case and calculating and recalculating and calculating again the growth of these trees in order to support as a business plan as robust and truthful as possible, and not only for the auditors and for the aim of the validation, but also for the accountability of the project. If we don't know how much we are going to remove from the atmosphere, how can we project? How can we make sure that we are actually achieving something? How can we be sure that we are really helping these communities and helping achieving what we are saying that we are achieving? So it is. I think that the scientific part is it is a challenge. Don't get me wrong, but it is definitely very important for the accountability of the project.
Thank you, Lisa. There is also something that is oftenly said about carbon finance. It is that carbon, in some ways, outweighs co-benefits. So I saw in your presentation a lot of descriptions of the other kinds of benefits. Maybe Stéphane on Ometer, you would like to say something about that?
Well, I don't see a problem with that. Contrary, the project that we do, it has main advantages for the local communities, such as the fact that the land becomes fertile again, and there is a whole possibility to do agroforestry, the non-timber forest products, produits forestiers non ligneux. There is the water levels. For example, 1 year after our intervention, the fact that we opened up the land close to the village, they see in their wells that the water is much higher, so it has become from them much easier to access water. So I think there is no threat that a carbon project like ours would take away something from the local communities. In the contrary, it brings a lot to them, and especially the agroforestry opportunities, where we are starting to look at oil pressure installation, etc. So we will develop this, and it will generate a local economic activity. So for me, there is only a win-win there, and no problem.
Elisa, do you want to say something about the Mexican projects, maybe on the trust fund? That is an important component of this project.
Yeah, I mentioned before that that the creation, the design of the incentive scheme is a challenge, but we need that carefully neat in order to ensure the permanence of the project. And I think that the relationship between co-benefits and permanence is something very relevant. And I've seen, maybe this an example for you to visualize what I am referring to. I've seen a restoration project, 3 years forest, not mangrove, forest restoration project, being burned down from one day to the other by the restoration workers. Because the rationale behind is that, well, if the restoration is complete, I have no longer a job. So I need to burn everything down in order to start over, and like that, I'm going to have 3 more years of work. And it is totally right. I mean, not right. It is totally reasonable, you see? So the incentive scheme must support the traditional livelihood of these communities, of the owners of the land, in order for them to become the stewards of the project, the stewards of those trees. Otherwise, the project will not work.
Elisa, we always say that a living tree should be worth more than a tree that is cut. So I think it's the same challenge.
Julien, I liked your presentation because you have a long-term approach regarding carbon finance. Your activities is also quite special because indeed those 2 projects, maybe not Ometer, but the Yucatan one is 100% financed by carbon, and we face those issues of time lagging that maybe we will talk just a little bit. Can you share more about those challenges you started to describe here, and maybe give like the top 3 advice to someone who wants to get into those activities? I add a little something if something pops in your mind.
That was not in the question script, but now I will only give some very plain advice. Be resilient. Work hard and assign someone in your team that does the job for you. That would be my advice.
Definitely.
No, I mean it's super technical. That's all I can say. So you just need to be patient. You need to be, again, very, I think, conservative in the assumptions that you do, and take the worst case scenario and put it as your baseline scenario. So when it comes to financing, so we are not, as I said, it's 20% maximum of our revenue, so it's okay. But when you bet on that to generate, the majority, you have to make sure in your business case that for the first, let's say, 5 years, you are backed. You are financially backed either by banks, loans, or grant money and philanthropy money. Don't hesitate. There is nothing wrong in asking for philanthropy money or grants in our project. I mean, when I look at what they do, it's so great and it's so inspiring. You don't have to try to find the perfect economic model from the get-go. It's not going to work. So just consider that as a seed investment and find some, friendly organizations that get the long-term vision. But you have to present them a long-term vision, and you say that basically you are asking them to fund the first wave. So I would definitely have a business case that would start with philanthropic or free money, and then progressively change the model. And there is no reason why you cannot find funders to do that. But then you need to be good in the marketing of your project, obviously. But yeah.
Stéphane and Elisa, do you want to add something?
Well, I confirm the idea of combining free money, soft money, as you said, money that you get that do not need to be repaid, because there is today a lot of financing available from impact investors, all kinds, but they have one thing in common: they need to be repaid, and then with some interest, low or high, whatever, but it needs to be repaid, and that's one type of financing. And then you have the development agencies providing grants, subsidies, how you want to call it, where you don't have to repay anything. And there is nothing in between. And I think what I explained before, if we look at our project, basically it would be very convenient if like 1/3 is soft money that is covering, let's say, the extra price that we have due to the specificities of the project. And at the other hand, that the private market is entering and get a return on their investments. You have it in other industries, in renewable energy, when they would not have put the subsidy scheme in place for wind turbines, solar, etc., where public money is combined with investors that make a return. Well, we would not be where we are today. So I think also for land restoration, etc., it could be a model that should be envisaged. So I hope that the Agence Française de Développement and others listen carefully and are open to this kind of models, where they put a point, because otherwise they have to finance the whole project themselves, and that's more expensive. Here, when they open up together with carbon, they can do 1/3 of the project, for example, and 2/3 is covered by the private carbon market. So it's less expensive per hectare than if they would have to do it all themselves. But they have to accept that someone, I don't know, La Poste Française is making some return on carbon, whereas they put subsidies along the same project. And that's sometimes very difficult.
I totally agree with you both, and maybe it is. I think we all mention finance as an investment, as a challenge, because it's either we get creative in blending the sources of the funding for the project, because the fact is that these projects are expensive. No matter the technology that you are using, no matter your good intentions, actually, the better the intentions, probably the more expensive the project is. The fact is that you need fund for it. So either you get creative and get a complicated blending scheme, and it is not one or the other, it can be a combined effort, or you start educating the market. So you start explaining from the beginning what a tree is, how the tree grows. It takes time until one small seed become a tree and remove from the atmosphere enough carbon for you to get repaid. And this is an education that we all need to do. Well, I need to do in my job, and the market is growing. Every day there are more investors willing to take the risk of these projects, but we need to help them understand what those risks are, and we need to help them mitigate those risks. And financially, I mean, financial risks are obviously one of the biggest.
If I can share something, this is quite something new that we face today because of those net zero policies and regulations. Also, we see more and more organizations willing to pre-invest in projects to secure future carbon streams. And that's very interesting for projects like the Yucatan or Meter, but even cook stoves and water, because then we are able to launch projects and address that financial gaps only based on carbon. But definitely it's hard. There's lots of education. If I have one advice for someone who gets into this business is do your homework. Go on websites, check the prices, read the documentation that is on Vera and Gold Standard. Everything is online. And so indeed, just as Julien said, you need to dedicate someone. Julien, when we were preparing this session, you despite all the challenges, you were talking about why not take the lesson learned of these markets for other environmental issues. Can you share more? I think you were talking about water.
I was thinking specifically about water because it's something I've been thinking about. We've been thinking about at Untitled Fontaine is to say that what's happening in the carbon market, in a way, should happen to water. I mean, in France, we've talked a lot about water this summer. I was, very surprised by all the discussion. So I think there is obviously an awareness going on of the importance of that resource. And when we talk about companies, many companies, particularly in the manufacturing industry and even IT, they have a water footprint. They use resource, and we know that there is a big challenge of ecological efficiency. Because most companies, they don't optimize their consumption. So we need to push and advocate for them to be more obviously steward on that, but we need to help them and incentivize. So the concept we are thinking about is to say why shouldn't there be water credits as well? And for example, when companies make efforts and get results to optimize their water footprint, this incremental water that they save, why don't we monetize it somewhat, and why shouldn't there be a market to valorize that? And that would give somewhat companies a big boost and a big incentive to improve their effort, because you might argue that it should be their ecological mission, etc., etc. But in real life, what is the business incentive? So I'm not convinced, but I really think that this topic is. We've seen some ideas emerging on that. And probably in the next 5 years we'll having a forum here to discuss about water credits. That's really one of my hopes. Yes.
Thank you, Julien. Do you want to add anything, or shall we go to the? Someone has any question, any feedback from the audience? Yes. So I'm going to share the mic.
No, yes, I have a question for you, Elisa. Who bears the liability of when it comes to sequestration of carbon that is being sequestrated? What happens? You sell the credit, fine, and then what happens when the forest or the mangrove disappears? Who bears the liability?
Let me think. That's a very good question.
Buffer.
So obviously, there are some mitigation mechanism as part of the standard, as part of the methodology that you need to follow in the standard. As Romain was saying, there is a buffer, there is a whole matrix of risk mitigation to try to understand what is the real risk of your calculation. And therefore, based on that risk, you create a percentage that is going to be buffer and remove, let's say, from your final carbon yield, if you understand. So that will help us mitigate the potential risks that your project may have, and that includes financial risk, that includes social risk, that include obviously natural risk, like a hurricane. A hurricane may arrive and remove your whole plantation. So there are methods, let's say, like methodological or technical methods to approach that liability. But again, in my opinion, and as part of the Semilla Azul project, there are also social methods to approach that liability. First of all, you need to ensure the ownership of those credits, and that goes through the ownership of the land. Who owns the land, and therefore who owns the carbon? So the idea behind the voluntary carbon market is to approach the owner of the land and either buy the land or lease the credit, like the ownership of that carbon. So that's a huge liability. Like, if the owner of the land is the community make the decision to follow that liability or not. If they are not happy one day with the arrangement and the project, well, they are there. That's their land. So I think that training and capacity building and engagement and speaking to them in their same language, and I'm being literally here. Semilla Azul is based on Mayan lands. So all the messages, all the trainings, all the conversation must be bilingual in order to them really understand the value of that project, the value that represent these efforts. And we need them to be the stewards of that project, to really not only engage. It is not about participatory thing. It is them to really take the lead on that project because they understand that this project is meaningful for them. And obviously this is a very early project, but there are case studies really interesting in Mexico, in the Yucatan Peninsula, explaining how after 20 years of project, they want more. They want to renew the project because they are so into that project, that mechanism, that they want to keep on protecting those trees because they know them by name. They know, I plant this tree, so I want this tree to thrive. And I have seen that due to your project, the fish stock where I gain my food and my livelihood has increased. And they have seen those benefits. And that makes them the protectors of the project. Am I answering your question?
If I can add on the accountability side, it's pretty interesting. You set us, every afforestation project set aside 20%, 30% of carbon credit based on the metrics that Elisa said. So if your forest burns, or if you have any other problems, the buffer will create a loss event, and it's a fonds mutualisé en fait, and will remove the amount that has been destroyed. If it's higher than the one you set aside, the auditor sees it, declare a loss event to the standards that will take out from your next monitoring period again the difference. So they try really to emulate the carbon that is supposed to be, it's not perfect, but the carbon that is supposed to have disappeared. And that's how permanence has been modelized in those forestry projects, and that's how today we are able to say, yes, the accountability is permanent due to this mutual fund, the buffer. And they are improving it all and over. And so on the top of social, there is also accountability.
In our case, the projects are spread over many villages, so they will not burn all, I hope.
Exactly. It never happens that you have 100% of your project burning.
But what about if the project is over and people are auditor no longer come?
So maybe you want to say about the crediting period and how to enforce over. It's a century actually, the contracts. I'll let you talk.
Yeah, sure. So, well, first of all, after the 20, 30 years of, even less for cookstoves, for example. After the crediting period is finished, you can renew. I mean, the owner of the project can renew, can apply for a renewal for the project. It depends on technology. The renewal can be 2, 3, 4 times. What else?
Forestry crediting period is up to 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And semi-ethyl, for example, is 20 years.
I mean, that's all. So you can sign contract with farmers. That's what we do. And this matrix that set the buffer invites you to sign contract over a century. So that's what we do. Of course, after 30 years, you don't really know. It's impossible. I mean, I don't know what I will do in 30 years. So how a farmer that planted trees will know if it will be kept. Okay, so that's a risk, definitely. Now, I think the bet of the whole carbon finance sector and Ometer, for instance, is that you change behaviors, you change mentality, and you change also the incentives.
Yeah. I think you turn around the degradation towards a positive trend. And I think the best guarantee that the forest will be there is that it's on community land owned by the community. As Lisa explained, I mean, once they understand, once they live out of the forest products, etc., that's the best guarantee that it will then stay longer. But you cannot push us even longer. We have already commitments on 30 years. I mean, you need to find people willing to sign these contracts. It's already a very, very long-term engagement. So please don't make it more complex. Rather simplify, I would say.
Any other questions?
Hi, I have a question because I don't know much about the carbon finance. And I wanted to know, how does the carbon finance market combine both the net zero objective of companies and net zero objectives of countries? For instance, if a company based, I don't know, in Germany offset 3 million tons of carbon, so yeah, he's net zero, but then the country Germany still in its territory emits 3 million tons and is not net zero.
Well, what I can say is that there is different markets, definitely. So we are in this voluntary market where companies choose, let's say, to go towards net zero. So that's one market. The other market, like for steel, electricity, etc., is more a regulated market. But I think Romain is maybe better placed to comment on that.
It's so there is something called corresponding adjustment out there, and it's a word to say for instance, if you develop a renewable energy project in Senegal and you want to sell carbon credits to Switzerland, that really happens those days. Senegal has to not take into account this reduction in its national determined contribution, so in its accountability, and Switzerland will be allowed to do it. So, and they have to declare it and sign what we call a corresponding adjustment. There is a huge debate on the voluntary carbon market. Do we need those corresponding adjustments? Some people say yes, because otherwise you will have a company in Switzerland claiming neutrality and the Senegalese government or NGO claiming that it reduces. Some say no, it's only a claiming issue. Switzerland, if it's on a voluntary purpose, will never take into account that credit, which is a fact. And at EcoAct, our position is to say, don't make it too complex. If on the voluntary carbon market, you don't need to, the host state of the company will never take it into account because it's voluntary, don't create new rules. It happened during the clean development mechanism where you needed those letter of approvals. It was a mess. And it completely wrecked the possibilities for administrations that could not organize themselves in sub-Saharan Africa, for instance. And that's why the CDM, the UN system back in the Kyoto Protocol, worked perfectly well in China, India, countries that are well organized, but not in what the UN calls, in an awful way, the least developed countries. So, well, that's our position, and that's the state of the debates today.
it's also part of this legal framework. In Burkina Faso, for example, they decided that developers that develop a project that that is in favor of the developers, they can sell the credits to a company in Europe, and Burkina Faso itself will not take into account these credits for its own national targets. Yeah. So that's clearly needed, a legal framework clarifying these things, or saying how much of the credits you need to leave to the country, for example. A possibility in Senegal is that they say, okay, a part of it remains within the country and the rest you can sell on the market. But that is indeed necessary to be able to make a case, otherwise you have surprises, and that's not what investors want.
But the good thing with all of this is now we are talking more and more with states. In Kenya, where we work a lot, we have to meet the Ministry of Environmental Affairs, talk with them, we exchange, and that's the good part. Now, what will come out of it, I don't know. Any other questions? Yes.
Thanks. Yes, I had a question about the price of the credits. I think, Eliza, you mentioned for your project in Mexico that was about $30 a ton, and Stefan, you talked more about 20 euros.
Yes.
So I was wondering, is it hard beyond finding the initial funding for the project? Is it hard afterwards to explain to companies willing to get the credits this price difference? Even though when you've got like a 5-star project with a lot of co-benefits, is it still hard today to find investors willing to pay above the market price for credit?
I can say yes. It's very hard. I mean, Roman, you are our broker trying to sell our project, but we see that. I mean, we talk also directly to potential investors, etc. And you see the increasing interest, but today it's much easier to take a RED Plus project, conserving a forest. You get your credits much faster and they are much cheaper. So yeah, it's just hard for a reforestation project in this particular area to be competitive. And yeah, that's all I can say.
Yeah, if I may, it very much depends on how you are selling your credits, that one, and also how much your credit is really worth. Like, think about it as okay, think about it as an apple. And Catalina will laugh because I always do the same example. I'm sorry. I'm very basic. Okay. So what do you need, farmer, in order for you to produce one apple? You need to take the seed out of the apple, put it in the ground, water it, let it grow, wait. You sit down and you wait your tree grow. And then when the tree is mature, it will give you one apple, and that apple is not longer an apple. I mean, it is not worth. And up until this apple is on the market, is on the store, then you can buy it. Right? But that apple needs to go down from it must be harvested, put in a box, in a truck, that from the truck into the store, and in the store you have to pay the rent, you have to pay the salary of your people, and so on and so forth. So if you want to buy that apple on the market, on a spot it's called, you need to pay not only for the apple, but for all the costs that the seller has invested, and all the time that has invested in creating that apple. You see? So the market price right now on spot is a reflection of that amount of money and time that you have invested in creating that ton of carbon, plus obviously market premiums, bonuses, and so on, because, for example, in innovative projects, there is few units in the market. It is not the same a Fuji apple, but a very ugly local apple. There is a premium for those beautiful apples in the market. So that's one option. Another option is those investors that instead of waiting for the apple to arrive to the store, they invest in the apple from the seed. So I want that Fuji apple, because I love Fuji apples, I want that in 20 years in my stomach, in my house. So I start investing since and making sure that the farmer is putting the correct seed in the correct round, and I am patient enough to see that tree thrive, and I'm going to invest 20 years before that apple is really in my pocket. So obviously, there is also a premium for that investment, because there is a 20 years probably difference in between, depends on the project. For mangrove project, it's around 7 years. But you are going to pay for exclusively for what are the costs and the time that you need to invest in that seed to grow into an apple. You see? So there are two market price. There is what is called upfront market price, and there is also on-spot market price.
And can you give the difference, for instance, for
Sure.
a project like Yucatan?
Sure. So in a very specific example, like Yucatan, we are seeing prices for blue carbon restoration projects in between, 25 euros per ton, whereas Semilla Azul is around, I don't want to sleep in here, but 14, right? Yeah, I had that figure in my mind. So 14 euros is the cost that we need to invest. And when I say we, it's not only EcoAct, but it is EcoAct plus Resiliencia Azul plus the scientists plus the community to create and put it in the market that ton of carbon.
It's finance. So it's, at the end of the day, selling, buying, it's all about storytelling. And no, it's true. So that's a way to say it. That's a very technical, scientific approach to explain why they should buy yours. On our case, we don't have such a level of detail. So we try to have the final people buying, create the emotional link with 1001 Fontaine, saying when you buy one credit from 1001 Fontaine, it's not just like buying one credit from any project. It's a special carbon credit. So we try to push the premium through that. And one of the ways to say is that when you buy one credit, what we'll do out of that, we'll finance free water for children at school. Okay, so in that case, it's just, it's like you're creating a virtuous circle of socioeconomic impact, and in that case, that can justify why it's not 8 euros but 12 or 15, and they see it. So, there is just my point is that it's just not rational here, I believe, and I think it's a market. So there are some emotionalities, irrationalities that you need to take into account. You need to rely on good brokers to do it, but I think it's not sufficient. I think that we also need, as an organization, to find some companies as well that through their CSR strategy, etc., will get it, and then you can leave it to the broker, negotiate, etc. So my advice is not just give it to the broker, and again, but you have to be active on that if you want to have solid revenues and increase your premium. That would be my takeaway.
I can just add that, for example, in one project, we have a pharmaceutical company interested to buy our credits, and they were also interested in the medicinal value of the neem that is growing in our trees, you see. So if you can make a link between, let's say, the reforestation project that we just discussed, the carbon, etc., and the content of the project or some specificity, then it increases the appetite, I would say, from companies to invest in your project.
I was just wondering if there is a secondary market for the voluntary carbon credits.
Secondary, you mean like we buy once and then it's resell to others, right?
For instance, if I am an investor, but I don't do any bilan carbone,
Oui. Like speculation in some way.
emissions, but I want to invest in a project and I will get the credits. Can I sell them to the market?
Oh yes, there is. We are not one of them. Though I would love that we have finance to pre-finance our great projects. That's for sure. And it would mean then that we would wait for the carbon and then at some point sign with persons that want those carbon credits when we feel it's the right price. There are some funds, impact funds. I won't say their name, but it's quite something that is around. And we see, for instance, there is a figure. We know that each year there is more carbon issued than retired. Despite this fact, there is on the spot market that Elisa was talking about, we don't find those credits. So it means that some people keep them. First, it's companies because they have huge obligations that they set themselves. I want to get net zero, yeah, so I need to buy credits now to be in line with my promises in the future. That's maybe the reason one. And then there are some investors that invested in RED+, for instance, keep their credits and sell those credits once it's at the best price for them. The RED+ in Peru, big forest conservation, I know that they are doing this because then they see EcoAct, my colleagues, and they say, okay, now we want to sell those 1 million credits, but we want this price. And they raise the stakes. And that I think is good because those are project developers in that case. Stéphane, I see that you wanted to say something.
I hope to find already a pre-financing party. If it's sold later on, I don't really care.
Is there another question? Maybe we can take one last. Yes, 10 minutes. One or two. No? There's always one last.
Thank you. Maybe what are the biggest challenges that you're facing in your projects?
Go ahead.
10 minutes.
The biggest challenge.
The biggest.
Well, apart from all what we talked already about, I think finding a reliable people to do the execution on the ground is also a big challenge. We try to involve local people, local talent, because you need also educated people that really can manage a project locally. And we have a mix between Europeans, expats trying to develop there with all good efforts and but yeah, I can tell you living I didn't do it, but my colleagues do it. They live for 6 months or 1 year in Bakel. Well, we have a quote: "There is no wine at Bakel." It's like it's hard circumstances, so you can send some people there for 6 months or a year, but at the end they just don't want to continue there, and you need to find other people that you need continuity, etc. So that is really a challenge that we have. It's a more an operational one, but and we are thinking about developing a kind of MBA program for local talents that studied, for example, in Paris, but that are originating from Senegal area, and that learn about all the challenges of reforestation, etc. It's a program that we try to put up for like 20 students, and we hope that the 5 best would work for Hometer, but that the others spread the word and scale up the thing. So that's one of the challenges.
Send the resumes. Elisa?
I was thinking about it. So to me, probably the biggest challenge right now is a matter of, if you want to, a matter of communication. And it is very related with what we all talked before, and it is very, I think you mentioned it, Julian, also. And it is a matter of design. So think about it, like we, as a designer of the project, of a project, we need to make sure that we understand all the stakeholders' positions, right? So we need to understand the position of the landowners or the community normally. We need to understand the position of the technical team, the scientists. We need to understand the position of the investor, if any, and the financial team that is pushing for a strong business case. And obviously, we need to take in account the standard position. So you need to, how is that called? Juggling? You need to juggle with all these different positions and be open-minded and flexible with all these different positions. But also, you need to make everyone happy. And being flexible enough to understand that troubles are going to happen in the way. So how to communicate, how to open, let's say, a trusting environment enough for all these stakeholders to understand not only what the project is and what the project will bring to them, but also try to understand what the risk and troubles along the line, along 20 years are going to happen. So it is a matter of design, it is a matter of communication, but it is also a matter of trust, let's say. So to me, that design, that governance is the major challenge that developers are facing right now, if you want to do like a feasible and a fair project.
So as a project developer and operators, our main challenge is scale, basically. You know, I will use the same analogies and the carbon business case, the impact business case. Your projections are always higher than what you're going to achieve. It took us 15 years to basically make the proof of concept in Cambodia, achieve break-even, national impact. And, you know, we've done that because, and we've managed to succeed in Cambodia because we were focused, we were persistent, we dedicated some resource. We never, you know, got away from the target. So with that you can reach 1 million, but how can you reach 10, 100 is another story. So it's basically finding the right balance between maintaining what made us sort of successful, but at a small scale, and loosening somewhat the model and the approach to have more impact. So how do you replicate? And that's fundamentally the strategic problem we are facing today.
And if I can add one, manage expectations. Expectations of the market, low price, but good projects. Expectation of developers, high price, best projects with lot of co-benefits. Expectations of standards, perfect calculations, methodologies that changes all the 3 months that are a nightmare for us. Expectations of us. We want to do something great, projects that are fair, ethically irreproachable. I don't know if it's an English word, but you understood me. So that's the main difficulties, because it's still a market. So at some point you need to find the profitability, and that's not easy always.
If you really want to make some money in carbon finance, you need to be the one changing the methodology every 3 months. It's a great business.
Okay, I think we're out of time. So thank you very much for this very interesting workshop. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for the audience also. Et voilà, bonne journée.